Dr. Lucy Pollock, very lovely to meet you. You're in your place of work. You've just had a longish day, I should think.
Yeah, it's been a Monday.
It's been a Monday. So this is an expert episode, and we're going to talk about your book about getting older and kind of advice for us all about getting older. But first of all, do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
It's just lovely to be here, and thank you very, very much, Julia. This is a really, really fabulously kind invitation. So what I do is I'm a geriatrician, which means that I'm a hospital consultant specialising in looking after older people. I've done that for the best part of about 30 years, and I love my job. Most of my patients are in their 80s or 90s, not all of them. Some are more than 100, and they mostly have pretty complicated problems that come along like buses all at once. And lots of them have got families, friends, partners. Yes, lots of stuff going on. And I spend lots of time with older people.
That's such an interesting job. And it used to be the backwater of medicine, didn't it?
Yes,
it was the
it was
poor relation.
It was a poor relation. It had a really bad problem with image for a long time. In fact, my father was a geriatrician, one of the pioneering geriatricians.
Oh.
I was enormously proud of what he did. He died when I was very young. And actually, interestingly, it's a specialty that has always attracted a particular kind of doctor. But for a long time, it had a reputation as a place that people worked if they couldn't do, if they couldn't cut the mustard as a neurologist or a renal physician or something, which is a load of nonsense. Because actually, to be a geriatrician, you need a very good medical brain. And what I love is now watching really, really good young doctors come into geriatric medicine. It's the single biggest specialty in the United Kingdom.
Well, it's going to be the most needed, surely, because
yes,
of the aging population.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a very
baby boomers like me.
Yeah, we are going to need geriatricians.
I worked in the NHS for 25 years, and I don't know what the stat is of being a child of a doctor, but it's a very high stat.
There's a lot of it. But actually, when I was in my mid-teens, it meant I didn't want to be a doctor. My mother was a doctor as well.
And what kind of doctor was your mum?
She was an eye surgeon, which was pretty pioneering as a woman in the
So they were both pioneers, weren't they?
Yes, and we also lived a long way away from most places. We lived in the west of Northern Ireland. So they were quite an eccentric couple. And my mother worked also as a police surgeon, which was a courageous thing to do through
the in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
So yes, I had a lot of medicine around, but I thought, well, that means I'm not going to be a doctor. I thought I'm going to go and be a biochemist. And that would have been an absolute calamity. I cannot tell you how bad I am with a pipette. I would have been a really, truly awful scientist. So it was lucky that I saw the light and realized that I shouldn't try to escape my destiny. But my siblings aren't doctors. They do other things.
So just to do one more personal question, how old were you when your father died?
13. And he died in an accident, so it was very sudden indeed. And my little sister was 11 and my brother was 9.
Gosh.
So that turned our family completely upside down. Yes.
Well, there's a whole route we could go down there, but this is the expert episode. I think often as, I've just given a talk, and I think how our childhood shaped us and what we do is very profound.
It clearly did have an enormous impact on all of us. One of the things that I've been thinking about it quite a lot recently, because my mother died not very long ago. So I'm now, as a friend said, when both of your parents have died, you're in the front pew now. Thank you very much. Yes,
you're the next.
And I've been thinking about it. One of the things I actually have written about in the second book is about how people break bad news or share bad news. And I've written about the time that my aunt came to tell me. I was in London. I was at day school, bizarrely, in London, living with very lovely distant cousins that I didn't know very well. And my aunt had to come and tell me that my father had died. And she
was it in a car crash? It wasn't to do with the troubles.
He died in an electrical accident at home. He was electrocuted. So it really was
random.
A totally random accident on a Sunday afternoon. He was outside fixing, making drinking troughs for ponies, and it was raining, and he put a rolled down in a damp puddle, and he died.
Gosh, I'm
And
so
and so
sorry.
it was very awful for a lot of people. It wasn't just awful for our family; it was awful for a lot of people who knew and loved him and his staff, and
Mm,
a very wide community. So it had ripples way beyond our
mm,
own family, and a lot of people were incredibly kind, Juliet, as you can
mm.
imagine, and sort of picked us up and mended it. But one of the things
You
that
can't
is really,
really mend it, though, to
no,
be
you
honest.
can't mend it. They did their
They
best
supported you.
and they supported us. But what I also remember, and what was very important to me about that time, is how beautifully that aunt of mine, who had had no training in how you're supposed to share bad news, how beautifully she did it instinctively and carefully and slowly. She protected me as much as she could as she handed me that news. And I've never forgotten it.
I can
So
see it in
I
your
learned a
face
lot from
now.
that.
Yeah. Gosh. So is there something about the kind of living on the edge of life and being so close to it? Is that what is it? Why are you so passionate about geriatric care?
Oh, well, why do I like geriatric medicine? I have always liked medicine. Medicine is fantastic and it's so interesting. And actually, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a geriatrician. I kind of knew I was going to be a physician rather than a surgeon. That usually comes to you fairly early on in your
'Cause you
career.
can't cut.
I'm hopeless at cutting.
Mm,
I can't tell you how bad I am at that. That
mm,
would have been a bad choice. But also, I'm really interested in the workings of the body and the complexity of it. And then I realized fairly early on, I enjoyed all of my medical specialty jobs like respiratory medicine and hematology and whatever. But I didn't know which of them to do. And then this amazing older boss, he looked at me and he said, he was a gastroenterologist and he was trying to advise me. And he looked at me and he said, Lucy, I hope you won't be offended, but I think you should do geriatric medicine. And the minute he said that, I thought, of course you're right. Of course you're right, Mike. I know that's what I should be doing. And because why? Because it's so interesting. It's incredibly complicated medically. You need to really understand well, try to understand what you're doing,
all the
not that I do all the time,
comorbidities.
all the
Yeah.
comorbidities. And then you really got to have that understanding of a little bit, at least, about what is important to that person. We can do any number of blood tests and scans and medicines and more scans and more procedures and whatever to older people, but that can get us absolutely nowhere. So that thing about trying to understand what's important to people, what has meaning for them, what kind of medication is actually valuable to them, what's worth taking, all of that. And then the fascinating stuff about how they fit in with their family and their friend and their dog and their house in Madeira and the son in prison and the other stuff that's going on that is actually incredibly
Very,
important.
yeah, all of their relationships
Yeah.
and how complex they are. I was thinking as you were speaking about, I don't know what, it really is about the quality of the life that they have and whether they want to, how they want to live that life that they've got
Yes.
left.
And really importantly, we misjudge that all the time. So lots of studies have shown that younger people misjudge the quality of life of older people because we measure it by the wrong yardstick. So we think, oh, I wouldn't want to be living in an assisted living flat, watching telly and not going out and so on. And actually, when you talk to older people, you will often find that they rate their quality of life much higher than a younger onlooker would. That's not always true, and lots of my patients do not have a good quality of life and actually really don't want the treatment that's on offer, and we have very honest conversations about that.
Is
That's
that
really
loneliness? Is that mainly loneliness?
loneliness comes into it, but actually suffering comes
Yeah,
into
fed up
it.
with the pain, all
You
the
know,
different things that
people,
hurt.
yes, and things that you can't do. I always ask my patients what makes you smile. Let's
That's
talk
nice.
about what you can do and what makes you smile. And I do have patients, and they always smile. When you say what makes you smile, everybody smiles. But then I have a group of patients who then say, well, nothing really, because I can't see to read, I can't hear the radio anymore, I can't move around very well, and actually I am. My friends have died, and I am very fed up, or I'm just ready to go. You know,
Yeah, I've
had enough
heard
of
that
this
quite a
long.
lot.
Yeah, and that's allowed, and it's really important that we have that conversation and have it honestly, or that a family member, if somebody has terrible dementia, it is really important that the person who loves them most in the world is able to say that for them, and that we don't make them feel guilty for saying, actually, my husband doesn't really want to be alive anymore. That's a
What do you think about the assisted dying bill?
Do you know, I've thought about it so hard. I
You
think
must have done.
it is really, really difficult because for some people, assisted dying is the right thing. And yet, for our broader society, I think it's the wrong thing. And how do you square that circle? How do you provide it in a way where older people and people with disabilities and people with imperfect lives, Julia, I'd love to talk about this constant chasing of perfection that is the theme of our 21st century life. You know, most people lead very imperfect lives.
Messy, grey, chaotic,
Yeah, and
and
full
full
of
of joy and good
and
things.
joy and mess and painful relationships and funny
Yeah,
relationships,
suffering. Yeah,
things that go wrong and recovery and loss and all of that kind of stuff. And people are on this kind of the cliche of the roller coaster. We are on it, and there are good times that come after bad times. And when you catch people at a bad moment and you make them feel worse rather than better, that's a very terrible thing to do to somebody, to make them feel worse about their life rather than better about their life. So how we get that right with assisted dying, I think there's loads of questions that we haven't even begun to answer
I
about it.
think that's true. I mean, the obvious reason why so many of us fear aging. I mean, I always think it's better than the alternative. I mean, you're either dead or you're aging, right? But but they fear it because the way it's portrayed is either not portrayed, or it's sort of blue rinse grannies in some sitcom,
Yeah.
or we fear that would, like, as you've talked about, that we're going to have lots of suffering at you're not going to be able to see or hear, you can barely move. But there is another side to it too, that's completely inaccurate. Not completely inaccurate, that's true, and there's another truth as well.
Oh, of course. And lots of my patients are leading lives that are full of joy and pleasure. And that thing about getting older and getting a sense of perspective, taking joy in small things, slowing down and enjoying things. Or for some of my patients, speeding up. Oh my God, somebody else saw in clinic this afternoon, I couldn't keep pace with it. And there are people who are, my 92-year-old who are driving old people to their clinic appointments. That's fantastic. There's lots of that around as well. So it is, yes, why do we get frightened and downhearted about it? I think we always have, because of the great uncertainty, the great unknown. So, for 2,000 years more, people have been afraid about the idea of extinction and of not being there. And
Heaven sort of is meant to sort that out, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, interestingly, you see, I think lots of people have given up believing in hell,
Yeah.
but they still maintain a well-placed confidence in heaven. So that's been quite interesting to watch. And then
My mother, can I just say, my
Yeah.
mother, who did go to church every Sunday and had a crush on the vicar, but she thought that when she died, she was going to meet all the people that had died earlier in her life in
Yeah.
the bar at the Ritz. In her
How heavenly. And do you know, if that happened for an instant at the moment of going, who knows?
Who
If
knows?
that emotion, wouldn't that be fabulous? I know my mother, it would have been a bit complicated because there are a few of them that didn't need to meet each other. If they're all there, if they can keep us, that's going to get complicated. But it's interesting how I have very few patients who actually fear being dead. I have
It's the dying.
It's the dying, of course. And that's a really important conversation. And again, I'm rather cross about the assisted dying bit because it has so been portrayed as you have a choice between a painful and undignified death or an assisted death, when in fact, most people die very peaceful deaths, well supported, in a calm place, not frightened, not in pain. And we can almost always get that right. So it's not true.
That's the dream, isn't it? That you'd have enough
And then,
medication so you don't suffer.
And most people have had experience of that, or should have had experience of that, and know that that is how it can be done. So I think it's really important that we hold on to that. But I think going back to what people fear about aging, this issue is um, I think there is a real problem with this search for perfection. And I've got an absolute, children
Be in
now,
your bonnet. Mm.
they go to school and they have to have perfect SATs. And then you have to have perfect GCSEs and perfect A levels and a perfect degree and a perfect job. And at the same time, they've got to have a perfect body, perfect teeth, perfect boyfriend, perfect house, infinity pool, and the rest of it. And that is not how life works. And yet that is the constant pressure. And this isn't just for the kids, it's for people in midlife, people my age as well. You just think, this is crazy. Stop it. And so one of the things that I think older people bring to the party is that sense of perspective.
Ah.
And that's one of the reasons why it's, we always go on about how good young people are for old people. And we say, 4-year-olds in care homes, what a lovely sight. Yeah, and it is, that's true. But we forget to say, well, why are older people good for young people? And then one of the reasons is because they bring a sense of perspective and they bring that experience. And, I was watching about a year ago, I was watching a lady on our ward, and she, she had a face that bore all kinds of scars. And she'd clearly been through a lot. And she also had very little hair. And she had a tremendous amount of wrinkles. And her teeth weren't great either. So she was, quite a sight. And I watched this young HCA who was working with her, and
Healthcare assistant.
healthcare assistant, and this old lady said, "Oh, I'll have my lipstick, please." And she handed her a lipstick, and you wouldn't know where to put the lipstick. There were so many wrinkles, where are you going to get it? Anyway, she was putting her lipstick on, and I watched that young healthcare assistant watching her, and this young healthcare assistant is a Hummy, and she has scars all up both of her arms from her self-harming history. And the damage that she's done to herself from her unhappiness. And I watched her watch that lady put her lipstick on and put her shoulders back and sit up straight, pleased as punch with herself. And I thought, you are learning about how life does not have to be perfect to be good.
Yes. And that, I mean, I find that very moving, and it's much more about how you feel about yourself. Like, I'm going to put my lipstick on, I'm going to have a good day. You pick up my shoulders. You're not looking in the mirror and saying, oh my God, look at my baldness, look at my wrinkles,
No.
You're going to go, okay, put the lippy on, and I'm in for the day. I'm in. I'm going to have fun today.
Absolutely. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to love this day. I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm going to meet the day with a feeling that life is good. Life is worth it.
And if, because I, obviously at 65, I being the next one up, and, thinking about Alzheimer's or dementia, what are the things that me and younger generations, if I have a healthy mindset towards my aging, what would that look like? What would it mean?
Okay, so that's a good question. And I say don't have a prejudice.
Unlike all the other bad questions.
No, you have sent me some really good questions. I don't want to answer all of them because I don't know the answer to lots of them. But how should we treat our future self? And I say, don't develop a prejudice towards your future self. We have this prejudice
and fear. Mine is a sort of fear.
And let's say there is a real fear, because dementia is a really big one. And it is now, most people don't know this, it is the commonest cause of death in the United Kingdom. Most people will not get dementia. 1 in 3 people in their 80s or 90s, well, certainly 1 in 3 in their 90s will have dementia. 2 out of 3 won't. But that's still a lot of people, isn't it? That's not a great statistic. And
that
it
freaks
is
me out, to be honest.
Frightening prospect.
Yeah.
How do we treat that future self of ours with compassion? And also, how do we look after our future self? So obviously there are some sensible things that you do in younger life where you do say, okay, I'm going to watch out for my future self. And that does me, everybody always wants
exercise.
Exercise, standing up, a little bit more often than we stand up. I don't make my 95-year-olds give up smoking. That's just mean. But, if you've got a choice when you're in your 50s, you probably ought to stop smoking.
Yeah.
Drink in moderation, eat a healthy, balanced diet, and maintain your social connections. And increasingly get your hearing checked out. That's a problem.
Well, that helps your neuroplasticity in your brain, doesn't it?
Exactly. And if you're sitting not being able to hear conversations, you're pruning your social contacts by mistake. And then
a sweet thing my husband does, just to interrupt you, sorry, is he read that, balance is so important. So now when he does his teeth, he does it with one foot.
Perfect.
Yeah.
High five to him, because I'm with him. I shall be thinking of him, your husband. Stand on one leg when you're using your electric toothbrush.
I think it's from Michael Mosley.
I'm sure it is, but it's jolly worth doing. And also, interestingly, you find that you can improve your balance.
He has. He was like this for ages.
Yes. And now he can do it. You can improve balance. That's one of the myths about older people, is that you can't improve your strength and you can't improve your balance after a certain age. You jolly well can. You can improve your balance in your 80s and 90s. And
balance is key, because when you fall, your bones are more fragile. You're more likely to have osteoporosis, break your hip.
Good balance is important, and being able to right yourself fairly quickly. So having muscles that are as good as they can be, so that if you do stumble, you can engage those muscles to keep you upright. That does make a big difference. And we know that it makes a difference. And the other thing that's really nice about that, about improving muscle strength a little bit, is that you genuinely feel better. So beautiful study in Ireland last couple of years ago, just doing very simple. This is not Lycra and trainers. This is simple exercises with a litre of milk in each hand, standing up from a chair, moving your legs around, leaning on a wall, really sensible things that you can do in your own home. Those made people, they were easy to do, the participants reported, and they felt better for doing them.
Because you have more confidence in your body if you kind of...
Yeah, go me. I've achieved something.
Yeah.
The same applies to how we think about our cognition as well. So we know that people who feel positively about aging, they age physically better, which is interesting, even if
your mindset, if I have a positive, if I'm not frightened and I'm not sending cortisol coursing through my system.
Yes.
And I'm not frightened of aging, my aging will be better.
What you can do is you can think, okay, what have I learned as I've got older? So we know that people who think in terms of stuff like, as I get older, I get wiser, or as I get older, I have gained experience, those people age physically better than people who think, oh, as I get older, my life is over and I can't do anything anymore. So can you fake it? I don't think you can fake it, but what you can do is concentrate on what you have done, what you have learned. Are there some positives?
And does that mean that you then keep doing more things rather than withdraw?
Yes.
Is that why?
I shall go to the party. I probably will be able to find a parking spot. So that thing about saying, yes, I am going to take this opportunity. My friend has invited me to go on holiday. I'm not sure about it. Well, I will do it. So yes, that is probably how that works. Interestingly, how it works about cognition is fascinating. So I talk about a really fascinating experiment by a woman called Becca Levy in the States, who's an amazing psychologist. And she got a group of older people, divided them into two. And the first group, she showed a whole load of negative words about aging, like dementia and decrepitude and whatever else, for about 10 minutes. And then for the second group, she showed them lots of good words like wisdom and sagacity and experience and all of that. And then she made them all do the same test of cognition. And guess what? The people who'd seen the positive words did better than the people. Of course, except there's a real catch here. They hadn't seen them. They had been flashed up so fast they didn't know what they had seen. So those subliminal, they had absorbed the words without perceiving them. And they didn't actually know what they, if you
it wasn't
what
conscious.
Words were they couldn't say it. It was subconscious, subliminal stuff, and it still had this effect on cognition. I find that fascinating because it means that the message that we get from the world, all those birthday cards, which are all jokes about how your life's over as you get older, and some of them are very funny. We shouldn't really have those because that is a bad message. The message is actually you can do it. There is lots of positive in here without being ridiculously Pollyanna.
Patronizing.
There is, let's be real, there are difficult things.
So one of the things I get a lot with clients is this tension between their older parents and themselves about, "Mum, for fuck's sake, stop driving.
Yeah.
Will you please move house so I don't have to deal with all your crap?"
Yep.
Um, could be dad, obviously. Then the exhaustion of the midlife, looking after older parents, having
Yep.
teenage bolshy children. Are there suggestions that you can make that can ease the tension before everything hits the buffers?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I see it all the time, and to be honest, I've lived it because my own dear mother was very, very tricky in her later years, and we had a very difficult time, especially because to me it was very obvious that she was getting dementia, but because she was extremely clever, she passed every memory test there ever was until very near the end. But her personality changed in a way that was very difficult. And I wish she had been given the dementia diagnosis sooner because it would have made me more forgiving of her extremely difficult behavior.
Sort of very
So,
controlling and angry and
well,
irascible and
unbelievably selfish.
yeah,
Just self-absorbed, and some of that was a magnification of a
pre-existing.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it did get very sad. Um and the driving, I had to dob her into the DVLA in the end because there was no way she was going to stop driving. She was completely impervious, and in fact, in the first book, I did write a chapter about driving to explain this, and I had to anonymize it. Mum was still alive and she was going to read it. And I don't know whether she recognized herself. I don't think she did, actually. I thought she thinks she was a brilliant driver. So that was those things that you mentioned, going into care, stopping driving, are really
Difficult.
very, very difficult, gunpowder flashpoints. So, how does one accept them and get it right? The first thing is probably to say, this is not going to be perfect. This is probably going to be quite messy. And I often say to families and carers, you are doing a very good job in very difficult circumstances. And I think sometimes people are just very relieved to be told that
Yeah.
you're actually doing a very good job here.
But really, don't we want to be doing it way before we get there? That's
Yeah. So in terms of sort of doing a bit of pre-planning, I think sorting out your lasting power of attorney is really important. It's just sensible. And as an older person, I'd say that is a kind thing to do for your children. Sort
it's a
out
way of
lasting.
loving your children
It
into their
is
future.
absolutely. I've got an advanced decision to refuse treatment
So have
because
I.
I do not want my family having to make that decision for me. Um, and so I think those are kindnesses, as is having a will and having your affairs kind of vaguely in some kind of
But
order.
I've got friends who spent 2 years sorting out papers, and you just
Yeah,
sort of
that's
think,
boring.
I mean, what a legacy.
Yes.
What a legacy.
Oh, for their aging parents, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, or after they've gone.
I mean,
Yeah.
after they died.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
actually, even while they are still alive, those duties of the sort of business of life, maintaining a house and paying the bills and sorting out carers and finding a new carer because she sacked the last carer and she now run out of all the carers in the
Yes,
town
because she's been black.
yeah, yes. And all of that kind of thing. Those are huge, huge pressures. And I think one of the things to do with that is trying to share with siblings, if you've got them, is a good idea because it is very common that the burden all lands on one set of shoulders. So in our family, my brother was a hero and took on the finances. And it was fantastic because he could do that from a distance. He lives miles away, but he could do that from a distance, which left me with more of the practicalities. And my sister wasn't in a position to do either. But what she said is, my job is to tell you both you're doing a brilliant job. Which was very kind of her. I mean, she was doing her best.
Not sure I'd have been that happy with that.
She did her
Her
best.
best.
And the but it is still difficult. But in terms of advice to people in that situation, so in midlife, if you're the person trying to look after the older person, be calm about it and recognize it's not going to be brilliant. Try and put in place structures that do work. So try and have those conversations about, for example, resus, treatment escalation plans, lasting power of attorney. Try and make sure that those are in place. one of my lovely colleagues says he feels, again, it's this issue with perfection, that quite a lot of people really want everything to be perfect for their parents, and they do sort of helicopter parenting directed up a generation instead of down, and they're trying to control their parents too much. I do recognize that. So actually, some of it is about accepting that your parents may well begin to make pretty bad decisions, but they're allowed to do that.
It's their
That
life.
is their life. You know, my mum had a decoy diary. She had this calendar on the wall that had sort of podiatry appointments in it. And then she had this little secret diary in her handbag that had a trip to London to go and see her friend, even though the last time she went to London, she got completely lost and none of us knew where she was. But she needed to be able
To be naughty.
to be naughty, exactly, to celebrate having that. And I feel bad that I tried in a way to control the situation too much. I recognize that in myself. I could have let go a little bit more and say, actually, mum, yeah, that's that you do that, that's fine. But we have this instinct to want to protect, don't we?
Or abandon. So I mean, I think the two extremes are very common, aren't they? Either I'm just done, yeah, and then that I'm walking away, and that obviously that feels bad, but and is really bad for the aging parent, or over controlling.
Yes, and sometimes the walking away is the right thing to do. I see amazing families where there's actually been a very bad history in the past. And that parent has not been a good parent. And I heard, a woman who said to me, I realized that my mother wasn't a safe person for me quite early on in life. I said, how early on? And she said, oh, when I was about 7.
Oh,
And you
God.
just think, jeepers. And yet she was doing her utmost to support this very poisonous person, and maintaining a respectful
Distance.
screen around herself to some degree, a deflector screen, but at the same time doing the right kind thing by her mother. But I see this all the time. We see in medicine, we see like a little tiny scene from a play, and we have no idea. We don't see act 1 or act 2. We see a tiny bit of act 3, and we don't know what's gone before and what's going to happen afterwards. And you have to be very respectful of that.
Yeah, and enable people to make the best decisions they can given the incredibly difficult circumstances they're in. So the common mistakes that we make are not talking about it before we need to, having a positive, not having a positive attitude, fearing it, and then as the partner or the child or the carer, what are the common mistakes that you'd kind of wish we all knew? Like we kind of like, there's lots of things that you learn about babies now that you put them to lie this way, and lots of basics.
Okay, things like that. Oh, okay, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things we can make is the mistakes we can make is the idea that we can make everything safe. I think people can feel that this again, it comes down sometimes. I'm sounding very gloomy about this, but sometimes this thing about being perfect. So that people can have unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen to their older relative. Some people are very realistic and pragmatic, but I do have families who are completely, absolutely blown away by the idea that somebody might be going to die. So I think that's a mistake. And, I can have very, very unrealistic families. And that sometimes comes into play with resuscitation, for example. It's such an emotive subject that sometimes, and most people are very fine and understand that resus is a process that is pretty ugly and unpleasant, is not the way most people want to go, and is very, very unlikely to be successful in people in their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Other people have got a very wrong image, and it mostly from television, where, you have one round of resus and then you wake up and marry the doctor, and that is not how it works in real life. So you have to be very gentle.
Dying on a life support machine is
awful,
just the worst.
awful,
Intubated.
yeah, exactly. Then so we can make mistakes about that. We can make mistakes about well, I think the biggest one is actually not asking questions of medical things. And one of my really big jobs, my mission in life, is to shift power from doctors to patients.
Yes.
So you will know about campaign called Shared Decision Making, which sort of grew up in the 70s, and all medical students are taught about it. And that is about how you share making a decision with your patient. But that is not what mostly happens. What mostly
I
happens
see
is,
it as expert to expert, like they're the expert on themselves and their family and their beliefs and what gives their life meaning, and you're the expert on protocol, medication, options.
okay, exactly. And that is how it should be. But that isn't what happens for lots of people, especially if they're pretty vulnerable and fragile and frail and maybe not able to speak to themselves. What actually happens is doctors make loads of decisions and then share those with the patient. And we've even got it as a snippet on our discharge summary. It says, patient and family kept fully informed throughout. My eye, absolutely not. They were not kept fully informed. And anyway, they shouldn't have been kept fully informed. They should have been kept fully involved.
Collaborative. Yeah.
So what I'd say is actually the big mistake is usually not asking enough questions, not getting the right answers, being fobbed off with, oh, you're taking this tablet to prevent you having a stroke. That's a load of nonsense. Nothing ever prevented a stroke. You can be on a tablet that might marginally change your risk of having a stroke, but it's not going to, and so doctors use these very black and white things. You must take this tablet to stop you having a heart attack. Well, that's a load of nonsense. It might slightly reduce your risk of having a heart attack, but it is not the be all and end all. So being prepared to say, actually, why are you doing that scan? What difference is it going to make? Is it going to help my mum? What are you going to do with the result? What if it shows this or that? Have you thought that through before you lug her off her bed onto a trolley down to the CT scanner and put her in a scan where she doesn't know what's going on?
So frightening.
Really important. And it's being humane, Julia. So this is, so much of our medicine is protocolized now. It's algorithm driven, and all the algorithms are written for people with one condition, usually in their 60s, usually.
And most of them have like 4 or 5, don't they?
Well, exactly. And so that trying to build our medicine where we actually listen, we find out what's important to our patient, and then we bring in the judgment. To be honest, if you could do it all by algorithm, we can all go home. AI can do that.
Get a bot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not how it works. Real proper medicine
It's
requires
humanity.
proper
It's the
thinking.
art of medicine, isn't
Yeah.
it? What I
Yes,
call it. It's a real
the art of medicine, exactly. And this is not about giving up on people, and it's
No.
not about being nihilistic. It is about working out what has value to that patient.
This particular patient. And that's the same with, I've interviewed Rachel Clark. I know her really well.
She's fantastic.
She's great. She's great. So for those listening, she's a palliative care doctor. And, she sees her main role as listening. I mean, not main role, but a key part of her role is listening, and then the medicine will follow.
Yeah, and advocacy and listening and building
kindness
together. Oh God, yeah. Doctors tend to be kind, but the kindness can get lost in the process. So nobody would want to be unkind.
No.
But being prepared to spend that extra time, and you do need to give it time, and none of us have enough time. But if you get it right, do you know there was an OECD report in the Organization of Economic Development or whatever in 2016 that suggested that 20% of healthcare activity globally is of no value to the patient. And we now think that's closer to 40%. So if we wanted to have a 20% uplift in our resources, what we could do is stop doing the 20% of stuff that isn't making any difference.
What is that? Scans and tests?
Yeah, scans and tests. It's my man with dementia on the ward. He's 92, who's having his blood sugar level test with a finger prick test 4 times a day because some protocol says that's what you should do. What a load of nonsense. We might need to do it once a day or not at all. And anyway, give him a Jaffa cake because it really doesn't matter.
Because that makes him happy.
Yeah, because that makes him happy, and that's what's important. And long-term treatment of his diabetes is going to make scrap all difference. So, it's just massive.
It's the sort of humanity and common sense rather than being driven by protocols.
Yeah, exactly that. But giving ourselves time to take a breath, look around and say, right, why am I doing this? What value is this adding? And some of that takes a bit of courage as well, because sometimes you are suggesting that we're not going to do
anything.
Yeah, and we need to be careful to bring a family with us to make sure that they don't feel that this is cost driven. This is about let's
The
do
best interests.
it's what is right for your mom, dad, uncle, whoever, partner. Yeah.
So how's your relationship with dying and aging? And so you've got an NDR.
Yes.
What
And
else? You obviously done the will. But psychologically, what's your
yes.
relationship?
Okay, so just to clarify, I have an ADRT, which is an advanced decision to reduce treatment. So if I was in a coma and wasn't going to come out of it, I don't want to be kept alive by tube feeding or by mechanical ventilation. If I had a sudden cardiac arrest on the ward, drop to the ground,
You
I'd
want
quite
to
like somebody to give it a couple of frags. I'd like them to try.
Yes.
Just at the moment, I do not have a DNAR on
No.
my own book, but so I have already sort of built some framework around my own treatment. I've got a lasting power of attorney, and I have got for health and for finances. The financial one's more important than the health one, frankly. So those things are sorted out. A lovely
Your
journal.
children, have you talked to your children?
Children, yeah, we talk to the children. They're pretty clear. My husband's got very clear views about what he wouldn't want. So I think our kids who are in their 20s have got a pretty clear, consistent view on things. They don't really like that kind of conversation. They say, oh, but don't talk about that. And then they say, oh yeah, by the way, can I have that bit of jewelry when you come?
I sent my daughter a song I want at my funeral last week because I just heard it, and it was very nice to be able to do, but also, I mean, she was tearful, but also I think quite nice to have, like, Mum wants this at her funeral.
How lovely, how much lovelier to be able to say, right, we'll have that one than to be sitting all arguing about it because you don't know which one to do. I think, these are good things to do. And then a German journalist said to me, at what age do you want to die? And I thought, jeepers, I don't know. Good question. I would, ideally, I'd like to die when I'm ready to go, but that may not happen. I may die when I'm not at all ready to go.
Like your dad.
Yes, like my dad. So, try and be at peace with the world and live each day as if you may not have a tomorrow. If we are lucky, we will get old.
Exactly.
And then, but then I think, and she was saying, what would you like to be the mood of your ending? And I'm thinking, well, what would I like to have in my hand? I'd like to have a pair of binoculars. I'd like to have the dog's lead in my hand. What would I like on my lips? I'd like, I would not like hospital end of
equipment.
Mouthwash. Thank you. I will go for a glass of white wine and an olive. So,
Yeah.
and I do actually, to be honest, for quite a lot of we have those conversations. We say, is there a taste that your dad would like? Would he like a taste of cider? And the family looks slightly surprised. Me. Yeah, he really would. Well, that's fine. Why don't we do that?
That's so nice.
Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows? We can make lots of good plans, Julia, but in the end, life just comes and gets us.
We have to surrender.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is that we, ignoring it and pretending it happens to other people is obviously extremely unhelpful. Improving our relationship with it, like not treating with it as something that's fearful and terrible, but really pulling the gold threads from it, the glimmers from it, and engaging with it and the joy of what you do have. And I find that expression flourishing in later life slightly patronizing and irritating. All those terms like the autumn of your years and stuff. But what are the kind of those golden moments? What are the things that you've seen with older people that you can't really have at any other time, that people hearing can think, okay, like in that movie, seeing have a fake orgasm. I want that. Meg Ryan. But what's the version of that for older life?
For older people, what really makes people smile? I think, and again, one doesn't want to be patronizing or diminish things, but actually it is so often the little things that matter. So if you say what's important to you, what comes up again and again, obviously is friends and family, but not necessarily they don't always come top. So I saw a lovely treatment escalation plan that said what's important to me: number 1, tractor; number 2, wife.
That would piss me off so much. I'd fucking run him over with a tractor. Jeez.
Sometimes I have to nudge people and say, I think you would like me to put Margaret on the form, wouldn't you? Oh, yeah, I'll put Margaret now. But, it is little things. And so what one realizes is at the end of our life, actually, lots of things, Atul Gawande writes so beautifully about
He
this with the
does.
immortal, and that our circle of influence diminishes and we become less interested in making new friends. And then we get fewer and fewer friends. But those bonds that we still have are really important. We saw that in COVID so much. So a lot of people have very few contacts, but those ones are very important. And then it is little things. It is often the dog. It's looking out of the window, watching the birds.
Seeing spring
It's
flowers.
music. It's so often music. It's and I always say, which music is it? And I love it. It's Iron Maiden. Well, fantastic. Let's have Iron Maiden. So the and it's different for everybody. Often I'm talking to people who've lost a partner or a husband or wife after a very long marriage, and I will say, they say, well, my wife died a couple of years ago, and there's a pause, and I say, gosh, you must have been married a long time. And they say, yes, it's 60, 61 years.
Amazing.
And I say, I'm very sorry. And then I say, you must have amazing memories. And of course, the minute you say you must have amazing memories of that marriage, for most people, that is a moment where we start talking about a little bit. I mean, obviously I haven't got all day, but just something about what was important. Where did you meet? It's almost always at a dance. We met at a dance.
That wouldn't happen now.
No, I know. Where do people meet?
On an app, on Hinge.
Yeah, which is fine. And
which is fine.
I've got loads of, the young and people my own age who've met on dating apps. And
slightly less romantic than as a
bit
dance.
Less romantic, yeah. But so there's good stuff in there. And it's being able to reflect on a long life and to say, I have had a good life. People say that very often. Not everybody will say that, of course. And there are people who've had really very, very difficult lives. But most people towards the end will say, I have had a good life.
I'm grateful. Yeah. I was going to ask questions like the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, but I sort of think we've gone away from those definitions in that dementia is a form of Alzheimer's, isn't it?
Alzheimer's is a form of dementia.
I mean, the other way around, sorry.
Dementia is a great big umbrella.
Like cancer,
Exactly. And then you can have lots of different sorts, and we're recognising the different sorts better. And it's kind of worth often knowing a little bit about some of them because they come with different behaviours. And so I spend quite a lot of time explaining to people the difference. But the most important thing is to acknowledge that it's there. I so often say to a family, would you be surprised if I thought your mum had dementia? And they always go, oh, no, we thought she had dementia for years. And thank goodness somebody's named it. Again, a lot of these conversations are about naming saying the unsayable, really, and then that huge relief when you have said it and when you've nailed it down and said, right, this is what.
One of my great fears, and I think for maybe most of us, is dementia. If it's diagnosed early, are there medications that can improve my outcome?
Good question. And the answer is I wish they were better. So the existing medications aren't particularly effective for most people. A few people get a huge benefit. So depending on what kind of dementia somebody has, it can sometimes be worth it. What is really worth it is having some really simple blood tests to make sure that you haven't got a treatable cause of cognitive decline. So, we will pick up people who are low in vitamin B12 or who've got thyroid problems or whose calcium level is through the roof. And so those simple tests actually are really important to get done.
Gosh, okay. That's good.
But so that's often why I would encourage somebody to go and have a check over. And then if one has it, no, I wish there were better treatments. The new ones that came out in a kind of huge flurry of PR last year are looking very difficult to provide, come with huge worrying side effects. An enormous
difficult to provide because they're so expensive, or difficult?
They're expensive, but also you have to have a very good tight diagnosis beforehand, which is normally going to include having a lumbar puncture and having your CSF taken off to do that. Now that can be fine for somebody who is pretty fit and well and has got a supportive family, but lots of my older people with dementia kind of crash land in hospital, having been going under the radar for quite a long time in and are actually who've got much more advanced dementia than then that it would be appropriate for that kind of
Mm.
medication. And then you have to have a lot of MRI scans. You have to have and an MRI is a pretty big scan. You have to lie still for quite a long time. It's very noisy. It's not like a
Quite
CT
scary.
scan.
No,
So,
no.
and then you have to have them repeated again and again and again because of this problem with these little micro bleeds that you can get from these medications, which which are quite common. So they're not. I don't want to sound too gloomy about it, but they are
They're
certainly
not a
not
magic come.
magic, no. But there will be treatments coming along. But importantly, the other stuff that we can do, minimizing people's other medication, making sure they're not on medicines that slow the brain down. I should have mentioned that
Oh,
earlier on.
yeah. What's that? What kind of
Okay.
thing?
So, really importantly, kind of things are these sort of obvious ones, but things like all the opiate medications like codeine or morphine and so on, the ones that people often take for chronic pain, like pregabalin or gabapentin, those can slow your thinking down. And you kind of think, okay, I can understand that because they're affecting the brain and how you perceive pain. But there are others that are much less obvious. So the really big ones of concern at the moment are tablets that are commonly taken for overactive bladder, which is very common in older women in particular, having to rush for the loo, not being able to quite get there on time, and having an irritable bladder is what it's sometimes called. Now, there are tablets that lots of people take for those called oxybutynin and solifenacin and trospium. There's a handful of them. Now, they mostly don't work, is the first thing that most people don't know. So they only work for about 1 in 9 people. The rest are taking them for no good reason at all.
Oh, gosh.
But nobody ever stops them. And then we
Blimey.
know that they increase your risk of dementia by somewhere between 10 and 20%. Now, that
Blimey.
is significant.
Significant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're only, and we don't routinely warn people before offering them these tablets, and we should. It should be absolutely mandatory that we should issue a warning saying, yeah, this may be worth taking. It may transform your life. If it does, hooray. And you really want to take it, that's fine. If it's not making that much difference, or if you can do anything else that helps sort that problem out, like completely avoiding all caffeine, and being a bit careful about alcohol and doing your pelvic floor exercises, well, that's a better way forward.
Yeah. That's really good.
It's kind of practical advice, but it is.
No, but practical's extremely helpful. I think we need to come to an end.
Julia, I would just love to talk to you for days.
I'd love you to talk to me for days. I also want you to be my doctor when I'm really old. So watch out for the call. Tell people where they can find you, the name of your books, all of those things.
Oh, that's kind of okay. So the first book, which is the one that perhaps I'd love people to read either, but you can buy either. You can either buy them or you can get them secondhand, or you can get them in any decent library, so you don't have to buy them. And you can get them online and on Audible or Kindle or whatever else. You get to listen to me read them both, which is nice. And the first one is called The Book About Getting Older, and it's got an elephant on the cover. And that's a kind of guide using stories to illustrate the medicine, the ethics, the law, and what we can all do. And then the second one, and so that's a kind of handbook of getting older. And the nice thing about that is it works for people in their 50s who've got ancient parents, but it also really, really works for older people themselves. So I love hearing from people in their 80s and 90s who find that a comforting book. And then the second book is called The Golden Rule, which is, I shouldn't say it, that we couldn't think of a title. I don't think it's a brilliant title, but anyway, it's the title. And there is a good golden rule, which is we should, do as we would be done by. We should do unto others as we would like to be done to. So that's important. And that is more stories, partly some reflection, but also really importantly, a sort of a bit of a manifesto about the things that need to change in health and social care, and changes that we can make now that will improve our own futures.
They both sound really important books, Lucy, and you're doing such important work. And it also sounds like that you're like me, that you love the work, you like writing the books and having a voice, but the work is the thing that really keeps you going.
I learned from an old colleague. She said, when I'm feeling really downhearted and all the admin and the leadership and whenever all the other jobs is getting me down, she said, I go and do a clinic and then I feel better.
Yeah. What a lovely way to end.
But you feel like that too.
I totally feel like that. I had an aura ring that I had a fight with and I put it in the drawer now, but for about a month that I used it. The interesting stat that for me was that all of my stress levels completely dropped when I was seeing clients.
Yes. How interesting. What other people would perceive as the most difficult, stressful thing is the bit that allows you to grow.
Quite often it asked me if I'd had a nap.
Your secret side. Well,
Seriously.
isn't that amazing? So, but it is that concentration on the person in front of
Yeah.
you, to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah.
All your other problems have to go
Completely
away.
fall away.
Yeah, and you give that person all of your attention, and that's a really precious thing to be able to do.
Yeah. And it's reciprocal. You get a lot back from it.
Yeah. Yeah, loads.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's I think it's easy. I don't want to sound complacent or smug or showy offy about it, but I do want to sound grateful because I am grateful. I have had a very happy, interesting, varied, rewarding career, and I'm lucky that I can go on doing it now. It's nice to
Until you're very old.
yes, who knows.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you for the important work you do. Really makes a difference.
No,
Lovely
thank you.
talking to you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you very much.